This is your Thursday devotion, and I know that all of us would quickly say that we want the will of God in our lives. We recognize that the will of God is the best. Sometimes we settle for good when we could have best if we would just follow His will completely. And that brings me to tonight's set of scriptures from Matthew 25, beginning at verse 36. Let me just read it to you and put a little emphasis on a few places. Then Jesus came with them to a place called Gethsemane, and He said to His disciples, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." And He took with Him Peter and 2 sons of Zebedee, and began to be grieved and distressed. And He said to them, "My soul is deeply grieved to the point of death. Remain here and keep watch with me." Then He went a little beyond them, and He fell on His face, and He prayed, saying, "Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will." He came to His disciples and found them sleeping, and said to Peter, "So you men could not keep watch with me for 1 hour? Keep watching and praying, that you may not enter into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." He went away again a second time and prayed, saying, "My Father, if this cannot pass away unless I drink it, your will be done." Again He came and found them sleeping, and their eyes were very heavy. He said to them again, and then went away and prayed a third time, saying the same thing once more. "Father, not my will, but thy will be done." There are several things that I want to point out here. In verse 37, He was grieved, distressed. Now, He knew what the will of the Father was. He knew that He had to become the payment for our sin. He knew that there was no other way that we could enter into heaven. And He knew that the reason that He was sent, the reason that there was the first advent, was because He would have to come and die for our sin. Yet He was grieved and distressed. It says, grieved and depressed even to the point of death, verse 38. And in verse 39, He prays, if this cup of me going to the cross of Calvary to be sacrificed by crucifixion, if this cup could pass from me, please let it. After He's found His disciples asleep, He went back and prayed the exact same thing again. This time it's a little more abbreviated in what it's written for us, but nevertheless it's the same thing. But as you will. Now, it's interesting to me that He had said what He said to His disciples, and I've always taken it that He realized that His disciples' flesh were weak, even if their spirits were good. But remember that Christ was God-man. He had God's Spirit, but He also had man's flesh. And He had all that comes with man's flesh. Pain, tiredness, emotions, all of the things that we have. Now, God's will was clear to Him from the beginning. And yet He prayed against God's will. Oh, no, he prayed for God's will ultimately. But He prayed if there's any other way. Have you ever come to that place in your life where you pretty well know what God's will is, but you want out? You want something different. Maybe something that's not quite so tough. Are we willing to say what Christ said? Thy will be done? But there's more. You see, I always taken that section about the spirit being willing and the flesh being weak. I'm not sure that He wasn't saying that not only for His disciples, but also for Himself. The Spirit inside of Him, the Spirit of God, all God, and yet all man. That spirit was willing, but he knew the flesh was weak, and he knew the suffering and the pain the flesh was going to have to go through. So maybe it was more than for just the disciples. Now, we all know the great part of this story is the fact that Jesus was willing to be obedient to God's will. And we're thankful for that, because without that, our salvation would never have been secured. However, I think it's time for us to ask ourselves, do sometimes we settle for good instead of best? Is it sometimes that God's will is a little bit more than what we really want to pay? And we settle for good instead of best. And we're not willing to come to that place to recognize how weak our flesh is, and to allow the strength of our spirit to say, but not my will, your will be done. Something for us all to think about. That's your thought for the day. God bless you and have a great day.